Friday, it's Halloween, and it's 11 a.m. almost, which means that it's time for the Flow State podcast. I'm Stuart P. Turner. Hope you're having a wonderful day so far, wherever you are. Whether you are a Halloween fan or not, obviously it's probably happening around you, so don't be scared. Happens every year. What better way to scare everybody than to talk about budgeting? So, just as a bit of forewarning, one, obviously this will be a very spooky episode, and two, it's going to be a little bit stats heavy. So, if that's not really your thing, numbers and that, feel free to check out now. If it is, then please stick with me as we chat through some numbers, the influence on budgets specifically for B2B and for marketing for next year. And look what we think you should be doing about them. So, as you probably know, if you are either in or you deal with a lot of marketers yourself, the marketing budget is under almost constant assault at all times from various different places. However, weirdly, the senior marketers among us, are constantly talking about wanting a sort of seat at the C-suite table. We want to be able, in there with the big dogs, be able to, sort of talk the language of business. But there continues to be a bit of a gap between the aspiration and the reality from my perspective, which is often where we come in to help, but it can be a bit of a source of frustration on both sides of the fence, I think, when, it can sometimes feel like we're talking sort of two different languages. However, in B2B, you're often a lot closer to the commercial side, I would say, than B2C more often than not. So we're in a kind of better starting position, but there's still challenges. So what I thought I'd do today is run through a bit of light research I've been doing. Got my old mate Perplexity to just help me get a rundown of what are people across APAC saying, and I don't just mean like, Jeff's blog and random thoughts. I mean like reputable sources and people who've done some research. What are they saying about the situation here? And we're going beyond just, what's happening in the industry specifically. I'm just going to take a look at some of the economic and political headwinds that are impacting the region, some of the international challenges that we're facing, which obviously have an impact on our ability to spend or not, as well as some specifics around the digital industry, what's pushing marketers in particular, and then just a few, general asides from my own experience, which I'm sure you've come to expect. So starting kind of in reverse order, there's an interesting description of a profession in tension here across APAC when describing marketing, because there's still a projected 60% of marketers are going to continue to spend on brand. However, a large proportion of marketers are also saying that they want to continue to push demand generation. Now, if you've listened to this show before, or if you know what you're doing, you'll know that basically what we're talking about there is essentially the very top and the very bottom end of the funnel. As usual, there's not a lot of focus on the middle, which is where our old friend the sales marketing gap tends to start rearing its head, and that is a continued kind of error or blind spot in a lot of budget planning and thinking, which is driven by, to me, a strange sort of old school concept about needing to just push the bottom of the funnel, keep pushing stuff like we're going to push conversion, whereas really what you want to be doing is focusing at least up into the midsection and the top end to continue to build your future pipeline and just connect it more effectively, and then you will improve conversion. There's so much optimization that most people can do through the middle of their funnel, if you want to think about it that way. So it surprises me that that's still the state, but also doesn't surprise me at all. That was the main sort of, the reason there's a lot of tension. It's either the very top or the very start of the journey or the very end. Nobody seems to know what to do in the middle. And look, that's an obvious and easy place to sort of start fixing problems to improve your performance next year. So, to remove that tension, I would say, look what's happening in the middle of your customer journey. What's happening in that washing machine swilling around of people where you've gone beyond showing them an ad campaign, but you haven't quite started having a sales conversation? Like, you must be able to track them and do something with them. It's not super hard. That's where I'd focus. Anyway, zooming out of that to go right up to the economic and geopolitical sort of macro trends that are affecting us down here. As you probably know, there is still a fair bit of trade policy uncertainty and a number of global tariffs that are not impacting us as much as some other regions globally, but they are having an impact. So obviously our friends in the US and their, current tariff regime is not great. I don't think even for the US itself at the moment, but look, let's not get into the political side of it. We're not getting hit as hard as some of the regions. However, tariffs and political uncertainty obviously washes into the economy. It creates economic uncertainty. People pull back on spend. They don't make big bets. Everyone's sort of sitting on the fence a bit to see what happens. So whatever you think of the current tariff strategy and situation, the uncertainty it causes generally starts to create a bit of slowdown and, everyone playing the waiting game until we know exactly what the fallout is and what's going to happen. So the obvious sort of, discussion that everyone has around this is like, look, the US broadly is trying to pull back and, protect its own industry and economy, which is fine. Like that's not a bad way to think about, creating policy, but that obviously gets everyone else thinking that way. The challenge we have in the digital industry is that obviously a large part of the digital industry comes out of America. So, and a large part of the digital industry is actually global behind the scenes. Like the cloud is not all just in Silicon Valley, it's everywhere. So, on the one hand, saying, look, we want to bring more investment back at a national level, like that's great. Let's push our own economies and play to our strengths. Wonderful. But you can't unwind like 30 or 40 years of globalization across industries that are by their very nature decentralized. So I don't see a huge risk there. I just think we're going to have to wait it out and see what happens, which is what everyone else is doing. So, how this impacts you and how it impacts your business to a large degree will depend on, the industry you're working in and where your specialisms are. But look, for us, we do a lot of work with data and enterprise technology businesses. We do a lot of work with healthcare technology businesses. A lot of that is driven by Europe and the US. So this is very top of mind for us. And we're all trying to sort of navigate this, the challenges that are emerging. But there's, if you look through the sort of, sound and fury, I don't think there's anything, terrible business killing that's going to happen if you're being sensible there. So that's my hot take on that one. Bringing it back to APAC though, geopolitical risk is pretty high here. And there was a survey for, I think it was Invested Daily or PEC, that said that 75% of respondents to their survey here stated that geopolitical tensions were in their top 3 investment risks. Now, as I just said, like uncertainty, people don't like it. Investors don't like it. The money guys don't like it because they don't know what's going to happen to their money, right? So if you've been following any of the investment markets, you will know that everyone's been, pulling back to the old faithfuls. There was that massive run on gold over the last few years. Everyone's talking about like, it's just real stuff, right? You can put all your gold in a mattress if you want it. It's like real investment. So this, look, again, this is a challenge for us. It's just the uncertainty factor, right? How long is it going to last for? How confident are you? How much do you want to gamble? Like, I don't think, again, it's not like stuff that's going to necessarily kill an industry, but it does slow things, which makes things challenging from a marketing perspective. Because if we don't know that we necessarily want to grow, we'll continue to push growth. Investment in marketing potentially will be pulled back because there is no need to necessarily continue to make those a noise and push for new business while we're just we're sitting pretty. And look, the volatility in currency is sort of working in our favor at the moment. However, if like the US dollar goes up, for example, there's some debt servicing implications, like things could change here as well. So these are all things that will have a wash-on effect on business budgets, on marketing budgets. Like we can't really say what's going to happen or not going to happen. As I've said, you just got to kind of ride it out, basically. And finally, in this region, like a few of the Southeast Asian markets have had their forecasts downgraded. So to me, as a survivor of both the Y2K millennium disaster that we narrowly averted, thanks IT, and also the GFC, I don't think this is a massive issue because, every problem's an opportunity, right? Now, if there's an economic slowdown and you're in a digitally driven industry, I would see that as a potential growth opportunity personally, because slowdown, broadly speaking, at this top level, like doesn't mean every single industry slows down. Obviously, it just means that some big growth drivers do. So I would be saying, look for the silver lining there. So look, I think, broadly speaking, the economic issues are what they are globally. There's not much we can do about them. What does it mean for us down here? Well, again, a lot of the companies we work with are, based out of the US or they're based out of Europe. I would say if you're reporting back up to your overlords slash friends or colleagues in the US and they're looking at the APAC market and thinking, what do we do down there? The things that we used to do super well back in my previous life in global scale media was say, look, like a lot of US and European companies treat the APAC region, and particularly ANZ, as a great test bed for things you can then roll back out globally, because the nature of the market here is super interesting. And you can pick one or two countries or industries and just super quickly test stuff and then be pretty confident they're going to work at a bigger scale. So if anything, I would be saying, look, increase your attention on the APAC region, and to the marketing people here, I'd be thinking about what you can pitch that's going to be different and innovative and interesting that could then be taken back globally, make yourself look awesome, make your team here look awesome, and butter up your direct stakeholders for a raise next year. Like, it's the way to do it, isn't it? So look, that's all I've got to say really on the economy. There's not a huge amount that's directly impacting the market beyond the stuff that's impacting all of us. Some other things that jumped out at me from this research though were from a digital industry trend perspective and some related things. Privacy and compliance, which I've been talking about quite extensively on this podcast as we've delved into the implications of AI again, is increasing. Like, we're getting more and more country level privacy laws being rolled out across Southeast Asia. Australia, sort of broadly speaking, tends to follow stuff like GDPR, which is obviously European, but is really what we should be aiming for. We're not fans of unwarranted spam down here. But look, what this means is it's going to become more and more complicated to manage your compliance from a marketing perspective across all these different regions. And that's going to become more and more complicated. And this is actually an area where AI can step in and help you, right? Because it's really good at standardized process-based analysis. So, if we've got there's been a recent new rollout of personal data protection in India, for example. There's one coming out in China. There's some across Vietnam. Like, if you're like, what is happening in these countries? Obviously, sense check what you're reading. But in order to build a much more sort of complex compliance framework, it's now actually way easier. You don't need the level of expertise at a national level that you might have needed before. So be comforted that you can do that much faster. However, managing that across your technology stack will become a lot harder for reasons which I will explain momentarily. But the first reason that's going to become harder is because there is still a huge skills shortage in this region around digital technology. And I'm going to dive into the specifics in a moment, but that plus the lack of talent in that area is going to cause us some issues, right? Because it's all very well having a wonderfully written privacy and regulatory compliance document. Can you enforce it? Can you automatically enforce it across all your platforms? Are you using third-party AI tools right now? Where are they getting their data? How's your own data governance and due diligence? There's so many related issues here that you should probably be aware of that could get you into hot water quite quickly. That it's worth attention. It's not really strictly speaking, it's not a marketer's responsibility necessarily to deal with all of that. Like, you should obviously be engaging people in your compliance teams if you have them. However, for any technology that you're running, there is a level of due diligence that you need to do around the data you're pulling in, like the due diligence that your partners have done, opt-in and permission to market to people. This is all the basics, right? It's just getting more and more complicated to manage. So that stuff I would lean very heavily on your partners and vendors for, and just make sure that they're doing their due diligence. But ultimately, if you're activating data that you're pulling from these places, it is also your job to make sure that you're allowed to do that. And whatever you're doing has the relevant permissions from the people that you are directing your activity to. So there you go. That's the end of that chapter. Look, the two things I don't want to talk about too much, because we talk about them all the time, are obviously AI-powered personalization and automation in relation to account-based marketing, or as my business partner Eve calls it, account-based execution, which I like a lot, are all wrapped up together, right? So there's a huge opportunity to do this way better, right? And obviously we do a lot of ABM and flow state, both from a consulting and an execution perspective. Your ability to deploy really effective strategy now is dramatically increased because of the rapid fire availability of information. However, in order to do that, correctly and effectively and efficiently, in our opinion, you also need to be thinking about moving away from potentially clunky legacy systems that are largely based around like advertising data, obfuscated, scraped information, like just things that have been cobbled together that don't directly tie accounts to intent, I guess is the point I'm driving at here. And that's an area that we're super focused in. And a lot of your more old school platforms are trying to say that they're focused in those areas, but they don't really have the the capability currently to pull that together based on depending on what you're looking at. And I'm not going to name names because trying to be more positive, as I've been saying. So I just think you've got to interrogate your own tech stack and think about whether it's really doing what you want it to be doing. And if it isn't, don't be afraid to just rip some guts out of it and rebuild a new one, because rebuilding them is super easy now. So that's another benefit of the magic of all the evolution of digital over the past few years. It's not hard now to decouple yourself from a platform that might have been very firmly embedded years ago. And I'll give you the classic example of Salesforce here, right? Or Microsoft, right? People like, you never get fired for buying Salesforce or Microsoft. And if your company's been running on Salesforce for like a billion years and you're sat on a huge, sort of multi, million gigs of data, whatever pool of information that you think is essential, it's actually much easier now for you to be like, just chuck Salesforce, right? Keep the data, build your own AI type tools to analyze it, and you could be back in action in a few months. It might have taken you years before to decouple yourself. And look, I'm not saying just throw Salesforce away tomorrow, so do not take that away from that point I was just making. What I'm saying is, it's a lot easier to interrogate the information you have and make sure that you're building IP that's only relevant for your business, not relying on what technology vendors are telling you to do because, they have a vested interest in you continuing to spend money with them. So look, those are some of the key things that are floating around from a digital perspective. In relation to this, I just wanted to talk a bit about advertising versus sort of organic digital strategy here as well, because activating your own data obviously is one of the most powerful ways to get your brand out there and to build those direct relationships with people. And going back to my my roots as an SEO and analytics guy, inbound and targeting determined demand is one of the best ways to sort of direct your activity to build those routes to your brand. And what I've been very pleased to see is an equalization of the advertising industry, because global inflation has been driving digital advertising costs up pretty significantly, which I'm sure you've noticed. It's no longer the cheap and cheerful alternative to running on like TV. In tandem or in parallel, the costs of old school advertising have been coming down because they've been battling digital for like 30, 40 years at this point. And they're all starting to realize that, hang on, because people like Netflix have ruined streaming, everyone's actually turning back to traditional media. So which you should never have turned off in the first place, right? But old school style, get your stuff in cinemas, captive audience, on the radio. Obviously podcasting is a great one for having people's attention there. There's a lot of traditional media out at home, it's all still there. It's really valuable. And I think people are now reappraising the value of those, just like, you cannot ignore this massive sign by the highway type tactics, and saying, look, they're actually affordable now. They're not, they don't have a premium on space and attention, but they do have a premium on certain parts of the the sort of awareness sort of function, or the engagement function, or whatever. So sorry, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time here. So anyway, the point I'm making is, look, digital media is no longer cheap, easy results. And look, it never really was, because it was never quite as effective as everyone liked to make out, and I was as guilty of this as everyone else at the time, right? Tracking through digital has always been a bit of a, we think these 100 million impressions were all super relevant, but then we realised there's tons of spam in there. It's never been as effective as everyone's claimed. But then neither has any advertising medium, because they're all trying to mark their own homework, as one of my old bosses used to love saying. So I guess the impact of this is rambling a bit here. If you are planning for next year and you're looking at your budgets and saying, look, where do we invest? I would strongly consider doing two things: pulling a ton of money out of your advertising budget, pushing it towards more long-term, powerful, organically oriented brand building or demand generation tactics. So that means reinvesting in earned media in the old school fashion. I would also be thinking about where people are spending the most time, not where you can generate the most impressions or the most clicks. Where are your audience actually spending engaged time? Not like just where are they going to mindlessly doom scroll through a feed, which you're interrupting with your annoying adverts. And like that's not something that any vendor or media partner can tell you, right? You need to sit down and think about that and go back to the basics of like, who are my audience? What do I know about them? How can I dig up some interesting intelligence about them? And where are they going to be spending their time? Their most engaged time, not just like, I can generate a ton of good. And coming back to what I was saying at the start, this is, one of those key aligning sales and marketing exercises that you can sit down and do with your friends in sales, or, salespeople. Go to your marketing team and be like, look, how do we know people are engaged? What are you hearing anecdotally in conversations? And I know it's fun to sort of crap on LinkedIn at the moment, but one of the pieces of anecdotal feedback I've heard all the way through my getting on for 8 or 9 years of working sort of pretty heavily on LinkedIn as a focal point is there are so many stalkers on there who you will not see interacting with anything, but then you meet them and have a conversation and they're like, oh yeah, I saw that post you put out about insert thing, or oh yeah, I read your article about whatever. Or oh yeah, I saw your video you put on there, but you'll never see it. They won't connect with you, they won't interact with anything. They're just on there reading stuff. So that is the slightly intangible side of growth that I think salespeople typically get and marketing people are afraid of because it can't be measured. But obviously, as a salesperson, it can, because once you close the deal, you can be like, oh yeah, actually, I had a few chats with that guy, and this all came from them. So it's an interesting point of collaboration that I think is overlooked, and I don't think people have enough confidence to just say, look, like we know that this is working, so let's do more of it. So there you go, bit of a soapbox chat there. If you would like to see how that works, by the way, give it a shout. That's what we do all day, every day. So coming back to the trends and the impacts and pressure on B2B marketing. So we talked about advertising costs. Oh yeah, so training and skills and development. This was the other thing I wanted to mention. So one of the challenges we're going to face down here, well, not me personally, because I'm not working for someone, but you might face if you're in a marketing job inside a brand, is investment in training on the way down, skills and knowledge of the things that you need your team to know on the way down. Availability of talent in the region, very poor. This is not an ideal situation for what is coming next year, because digital skills need to be on the rise. They are not, right? 34% of organizations struggle with training and team experience, which has gone up, by the way, from 2024, where it was only 27%. Marketers are saying, B2B marketers in the region are saying that they need creativity, efficiency, and innovation are in their top 3 most required skills, right? Not traditional marketing skills, often not traditional skills in any specific role. You just pick them up, don't you? That coupled with the spread of responsibility across 2 or 3 different teams for AI is going to cause us some challenges, because 42% of organizations are planning to increase IT spend to support AI, but they're also not super confident that it's going to deliver ROI without proper alignment across all the other departments that are going to use it, right? So if you basically bigging up your IT team to bring in AI solutions, which is sensible if you're doing it the right way, but you don't have anybody who knows how to sort of think critically about how to use those tools, you can't have anyone there to train them on them, and you also can't afford to hire people to train them, that's going to cause you some issues, right? So again, this is potentially peripheral to the marketing budget, but I would also think about, and I don't think a lot of sort of partners or service providers big this up enough, right? How can we help you to train your team on this stuff? Like me and my team are using these tools all the time, and we work with a broad variety of businesses, and like, I don't know, I'm not just blowing smoke at my own ass here, but like, myself, other agencies, other consultants, all these people are kind of at your disposal to bring in and help you and train you and do workshops and whatever. And most people I meet who are in, the kind of job that I'm like, I love doing that stuff. Like, I'm perfectly happy to come in and help you to do what I want to do, or, chat to any of your teams about how they're using stuff. So you don't necessarily need your traditional boring day of training where everyone sits around in a room and you watch someone draw those diagrams on a whiteboard. Like, it can be very hands-on and very practical stuff. So I would be thinking, if I was a marketer, like, who amongst my agencies could I potentially bring in, or who amongst my consultants, or oh, that guy Stu had a really interesting point about this. Maybe I'll call him. But look, we're all here. We're all fun people, and we're all usually happy to come and share our knowledge. So that's where I'd be looking for, bolstering those areas where you might be seeing gaps, or you might be thinking, who the hell do I hire for this next role? And again, look, I've hired a lot of people in my time across the digital industry. I would lean on your service partners and be like, who should we hire? How do we build a role profile for these jobs? Like, don't just put out one of those horrible idiot unicorn jobs where you want to pay like an entry-level salary for someone who would have had to be alive for 200 years to have all the skills. Like, sit down and talk to your agency partners and be like, guys, like, who are you hiring? How are you training your team? Like, they're the ones who are doing all of this, like, probably at a much higher cadence and pace than you and your team might be. So lean in, guys. That's what I'm saying. So yeah, look, I think skills and development and training is going to be one of the biggest issues. And this is all coupled, unfortunately, with the fact that our higher education system is woefully failing to educate people effectively about what is actually happening in the market at the moment. So I'm not going back on my previous points about the value of higher education. I think the challenge is that as you would have seen from the US and Europe, there's always a lot of chat about like the value of higher education, i.e. how can it help you get a job? That should not be your only reason to go and get a degree. I would say, if you just want to go and get a job, unless it needs to be highly skilled, don't even bother going to uni, just go into work. However, if you are going to university, and like, for example, if you want to learn marketing properly, right, like, I'm quite a big fan of old Rickson's mini MBA, right? It's distilled down all the stuff you need to know into a practical course that you can do when you're working. Going to uni now, you actually want to be getting back to your classic arts, humanities. Obviously STEM like subjects are always a winner, because that's what teaches you how to think critically about what is happening around you and how to deal with situations that you haven't been trained for. If you only get trained for one specific use case and you can't think outside the box around that, you're essentially useless in a world that is now changing faster and faster. So think about that, basically. But look, I think the impact for us is like, there's a lot more value that you can potentially add, and maybe you should be thinking about bringing on more junior people and actually training them in-house, right? So if training and skills and development are going to be an issue, think about, well, maybe you could hire grads, maybe you could start an intern program. Don't, for the love of God, try and start a free internship program. Pay people for work they're doing. But look, I would bring those people in and think, like, can you make the time to educate them in the way that you want them to be working, and bring them in and truly make them part of your team? Like, I'm a huge fan of that approach, and that would be kind of awesome for people who are maybe struggling, people who are starting their careers, they're struggling to get into work. It's pretty crap out there at the moment, like, great way to get in there. So look, there's a lot of things to consider there. And if I were in a marketing role inside a business right now, I would be chatting with the people who run the L&D budgets, or who are responsible for those, and be saying, like, look, give me some of your budget. I want to run like a marketing training program. I want to run a growth program. I want to, create something so we can bring talent into our business and we can train them to become us, part of the family. That, I think, is one of the most valuable things you could be doing, because then you are not at the mercy of the market. And as I said before, like, there's no talent out there anyway, so you're screwed if you are, basically. So just worth thinking about. And look, just to round this off, as we're sort of coming around to where we started again here, technology pressures. Digital technology is getting expensive, right? It's fragmented, it's expensive, it's not really effectively supported across marketing and sales teams, which I've covered in previous episodes. Like, there's a huge skills gap, and most marketers don't effectively use the technology they pay for. And I'll give you a specific example of this, which I have many examples that I can't name names for. Loads of people pay for LinkedIn tools, right? And often clients that we work with, we're paying for Sales Navigator. Sales Navigator is really expensive, and often they'll be paying for hundreds of, sometimes even thousands of seats, right? So you're paying at a minimum $100 a month the seat, right? So we're not talking small, small beans. Does anyone use it? Do they? Hell, nobody uses it. We come in and we use it for people, and we train people on how to use it, and they still don't use it. So that to me is strange, and I would much rather that budget came to us because we could do a lot more with it, right? But it's one of those classics like, oh, we just subscribed to this thing, everyone needs it. No interrogation of whether they're actually using it. Does it add value to the business? LinkedIn tell you you need it. Some one person somewhere is like logged in once or twice and had a look at it and been like, oh, this is cool, great. But these kinds of things are like what are eating away at your budget, right? And I'm not saying just hack and slash all your way through your technology, but you've got to think like, is it supporting my team? Is it supporting our strategic goals? Is it supporting actual revenue generation? And I would say, look, 9 times out of 10, probably not as much as you think. And at a very basic level, an easy place to start is just do diligence around who's logging in and using the tools that you've got, right? Just like, what is it? Most of them, if you're paying for a decent plan, will have some kind of admin console where you can log in and look at usage stats, who's logging in, who isn't, who's most active, who isn't. That's an easy way to start. Anyone who's not active, just kick them out. Anyone who's not using something, get rid of it. Then you can pull tons of money back in, right? And if it's not your decision, have a look at this stuff and take it to the person whose decision it is and say, look, like no one's using these frigging tools. Like, why don't we reinvest the money in something more fun? Like, it's just no one's going to shoot you down for saving money and then having a better idea of how to spend it. That's awesome. People love that. Just a little freebie for you there. So look, that's a challenging one. What I did find encouraging was that 25% of planned AI spend apparently is going to be delayed till 2027. Now, I've been saying this like all year and also last year and also in 2023, which was do not rush to just spend tons of money on AI. Think about why you need it and then build a proper strategy around it, just like as if you're running a proper business, right? So everyone went a bit mad, I think, last year and spent loads of money and time on AI. We're sort of starting to see now the wave has broken. It's not quite as amazingly effective at just instantly doing stuff as we thought from a commercial perspective. Can it save you time in some areas? Of course it can. Can it generate things a bit faster and a bit better? Of course it can. Is it magically replacing your sales team? No, of course it isn't, because everyone hates to be automated at. So, if you'd stuck with your gut instinct of, do I like to receive automated spammy messages? Do I like to feel like I can't talk to a human person? No, I don't. Will people like it if I do that to them? No, they won't. Glad everyone's realised that now. So look, this is good. And I also love how this is phrased. CFO crackdown. Love it. Where chief financial officers are becoming increasingly involved in AI-related decisions. Of course they are. That's because every AI business in the world is doing one of two things, right? Their sort of operational costs are obviously huge, which they are not passing on to us at the moment because they've all just rushed to scale their users. What is happening now, which has happened much faster than in previous years, is anyone who's been investing a lot of money into AI, which is the standard Silicon Valley playbook of, just growth at all costs and then make money later, they're all suddenly realizing that AI, that is that times a million. The costs are way bigger, the infrastructure costs are way bigger, the running costs are way bigger. And I think even the people with all the deep pockets who've been putting money into these are starting to say, holy shit, like even we don't have enough money to just support this indefinitely. So some of the costs are going up, some of the operational costs are coming down. To you as an end user, if you're suddenly like embedding all this stuff into your business, that could be a huge risk. So it's no wonder the CFOs are getting involved, because what they're essentially saying is, don't sign up to something where the costs might increase by a factor of 10 or 20, which we have no control over if we've signed a million-year contract with them. And we don't know, we've got no control over this business strategy or direction. Right? They're external companies. They don't care about you. I've talked about this loads. I won't go back over it. So look, that's useful. I think everyone's arrived at a much more sensible place they are now. The hype's dying down, thankfully. And interestingly, 61% of organisations across APAC are stating that the overall cost of MarTech is one of their top challenges. Now, as I was just saying, that is because of this sign up and forget sort of mentality that the digital industry has driven, to be fair, right? They get you in on a cheap plan, costs keep creeping up, you don't monitor the usage of the tools, and then suddenly you're spending like 30 or 40 grand a month on technology and you don't know if anyone's using it. And as I said earlier, there's a skills gap. A lot of it's not getting supported. So again, this is something that we help a lot of companies with, like auditing what you're doing, auditing what you're using. How does it actually fit against your business processes? Did old mate who you fired last year sign up for something and no one's cancelled the contract? Has he signed you up to a 3-year contract you can't get out of? You know, it's just a basic, it's not exciting stuff, it's basic due diligence, but it's got to be done. And as I mentioned, 32% of organizations report not using the full capabilities of their current tech stack. Now, that is also up from 28% in 2024. So, as I've said, I promise this is the last time I'll say it. You are spending money on tools that, one, your team don't know how to use, and two, they're just not using. So, if you want to save money to spend in other areas, that is one of the first places I would look. What have you got on your technology subscriptions, and what could you get rid of, or what could you reinvest, or what could you upskill people on? Just super easy. The other thing that's interesting here, which I talked about earlier, is organizations increasing IT spending, which is good, right? But what they are also doing is trying to bring back what's delightfully called sovereignty compliant infrastructure in this research, which basically means, are we controlling the technology that we use? And I've talked about this a lot previously as well, right? This is why we build our own stuff as much as we can. We try not to use external tools as much as we can. Obviously, we still do, but we're very careful about what we put in. Like, we want to be in charge of the technology that we use inside FlowState, and like basic replaceable stuff. Yeah, fine. Email. I'm not going to build an email solution. That's stupid. Our own hub though, and our own tools, we're building those because we don't want it. Well, one, we can't find anyone who can do what we want, which is obviously a challenge. But two, like it's actually cheaper now to invest in building our own stuff than it is to subscribe to 3 or 4 tools that might achieve something similar to the same thing. And this should be the mentality I think that everyone is maintaining going into next year, right? Is like, could we reinvest all the money that we are spending on all these external tools, build our own team, you know, investing in IT, investing in development, and just build your own stuff that does exactly what you want? That in and of itself is a huge way to increase operational efficiency. And due to all the, you know, scaling of AI, like it's much more achievable now. Like you don't need a huge team of developers. You maybe need like a third or a quarter of the people you would have needed. You still need development skills. Don't get me wrong. Like you cannot vibe code proper applications, right? No matter how much people on YouTube might tell you that you can. But look, you can do a lot more, a lot quicker, and you can be a lot more agile and responsive to what's happening in your business and the market. And that is a direction that we're going in, again, very heavily in FlowState. And I would encourage people in marketing, like if you are not technologically minded, seek some support in that area to think about how you can get away from paying for stuff, paying for other people's tools, and build your own things to do exactly what you want them to do. And I'm going to kind of wrap up there because I've gone somewhat over time as usual, but I'll publish this article with this episode and just chuck a downloadable version if you want to have a look, including all the sources, just so you can have a read through what I found. There is an interesting study by our friends/frenemies at Green Hat that was done in conjunction with Sixth Sense on the region. It's not a huge number of people surveyed. There was about like 160, 70 from APAC and then a load from the US, but it's really interesting. It's worth a read. And there's a load of other interesting stuff just sort of started all the way through this. So I'll publish this. I'll chuck on a PDF so you can download that as well. Not gatekeeping it, just download it. I don't want your fake contact details, thanks. Just take it and let me know what you think. And look, if you want to have a chat, like just no agenda, jump on a call. I don't talk all the time. I can listen as well. I can listen to your woes and challenges and ideas for next year. Give me a shout. Give the team a shout. We would love to just sit down for a coffee if you're in or around Sydney, or sit down for a BYO coffee if you are further afield, and just give you our external fresh set of eyes and ears on what you're thinking. So that is it from me, friends, for this week. Have a happy Halloween or have a quiet Halloween, depending on whether you love it or loathe it. And I'll be back next week.